Welcome to each of you. We're here at SSUC in Edmonton, and wherever you're joining us this morning, welcome to our online gathering of Southminster Steinhauer United Church, where we're spiritual seekers united in community. You're not alone this morning. There are many of you joining us from all over the place, from Edmonton, from Saskatoon, and other places too. And regardless of where you are, we're building community online today. A reminder that you can reach out to us during our gathering anytime to respond, to connect to any of our social media sites or by email. We're happy to hear from you, and with an invitation you'll hear more about at the end of our live stream today. Stay tuned for that. Let me introduce to you who's here this morning with us in this room. We're joined by Deb Mooney and Janet Dugan and Ann Didluck as our musicians this morning. As well, we've got some singers who you'll see a little bit later on. Jim and Pam are here to sing with Deb. Paige and Matthew and Brett are making all this technical magic happen in this room today. And Art and Sandra are here again helping with logistics. Thanks to them. Hello from all of us to all of you. And not only that, but Nancy and Dawn contribute today in our gathering from their home. And so we'll hear from both of them later. But here's a hello from Nancy. Welcome back, Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be with you again. I'm joining you from our home this morning as we observe our period of self-isolation. We were in the United States for several weeks and returned to Canada 10 days ago. We celebrate being home safely and in good health. Although the world has changed dramatically since we left Edmonton on February the 9th, the gift of community remains unchanged. Who we are together and apart remains healthy and strong. And although we're experiencing community in new and challenging ways, although we may find ourselves by ourselves, we are not alone. We are together in this time, and we remain deeply committed and connected to being in this time in ways that will strengthen the fabric of community and will deepen the living of the values we cherish so much. This is the hope and the spirit in which we gather with each other in this spiritual gathering online today. We're grateful that you've joined us, and we invite you, if you've joined us by Facebook, to take a moment to comment and let us know where you are and how you are as we connect with one another in this time we share together.
It's great to have you back in town, Nancy. And Dawn, we look forward to when we can all see you again in person. Do you have a candle with you this morning? If you do, I invite you to light it as we light our candle here. And as you do, we'll engage in a little meditation to focus us, to gather our senses into the place that we're at and into the time that is now. Let's light our candles. Now that we've lit our candles, it gives us an opportunity to simply take a moment and be fully in the present. Nothing reminds us of the calm and the gift of this moment as much as our breath. So let's breathe deeply and smoothly and gently. Look at the candle you've lit or the image on your screen. Notice the gentle flickers of the flame. Notice how the light from your flame dances in the room or on the surface that the candle sits on. Notice how the flickers of this flame show its vulnerability, acted upon by the flow of air and whatever's happening in the room. Let's recognize this morning as we look at that flame that we too are vulnerable, that we are interdependent, acting and acted upon by one another. Now notice the consistency of your candle, wax and wick working together as fuel and tool to ensure the flame's burning. Along with its dependence, your flame is also powerful and beautiful. Recognize that we, in our connection, in our being, are powerful and beautiful. With our interdependence and our strength, we come to this moment, we come to this day, we come to the challenge of these weeks ahead, ready for wisdom, ready for connection. As we gather with our Time for All Ages this morning, I want to share a story with you. And before I start reading this book, we all know that things are different in these last few days. There's been no preschool, there's been no classes, there's been no events and no activities. Lots of things have been different, and we've had to find things to do at home. And sometimes, not just for little people, but for us big people too, we get bored. This little book reminds us that it doesn't take much, just a little thing, to stay positive. It just takes a little thing to remind us that there are still good and important things that we can be doing. We just have to look for them and find them. So I want to read to you one of my favorite stories. It's called Little Bird, and it's by Germano Zullo, and it's illustrated by Albertine. There's not that many words, so some of them are just going to scroll by. These pictures will scroll by relatively quickly. Here comes a truck. Some days are different. Whoa. One could almost believe that one day is just like another. Anything else in there? But some have something a little more. Nothing much, just a small thing. Tiny. Most of the time we don't notice these things, because little things are not made to be noticed. They are there to be discovered. When we take the time to look for them, the small things appear. But suddenly, so present, they seem enormous. Getting back in his truck, driving away. The small things are treasures, true treasures. There are no greater treasures than the little things. One is enough to enrich the moment. Just one is enough to change the world.
Good morning. A reading this morning from Mary Oliver's collection of poetry entitled Redbird. These are her words from the poem, Swimming One Day in August. It is time now, I said, for the deepening and quieting of the spirit among the flux of happenings. Something had pestered me so much I thought my heart would break. I mean the mechanical part. I went down in the afternoon to the sea, which held me until I grew easy. About tomorrow, who knows anything, except that it will be time again for the deepening and quieting of the spirit. In the wise words of this poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
Good morning. A poem entitled Pandemic by Lynn Unger. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up, just for now, on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has come clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. In the words of this contemporary poet, May we find wisdom for our living.
As many of you know, several weeks ago, Dawn and I set out on an entirely unplanned, unscheduled time away in our camper van. We had no prepared route, no reservations, no real plan. It was a time just to wander, to let time unfold and see where it would take us. And although we didn't have a plan, we had a few intentions. We hoped this would be a time to unplug from our commitments and a time to practice living more simply. We saw it as an opportunity to focus on rebalancing, reading more and streaming less, spending more time outside and less time on our devices, walking more and sitting less, seeing more sun than rain and more green around us than white. And we found much of what we were looking for. And as in every journey, there were the unexpected challenges and gifts that found us too. In the final days of our homeward travels, amid the realities of the pandemic of the COVID-19 virus, it became easier to live simply, just as it became harder to unplug from the newsfeed. In my over-consuming of news, I met Lynn Unger's poem, the poem Pandemic we heard a few moments ago. I met it in my Facebook feed. In the digital world, these words have gone viral. In a time when we need to keep one another safe from disease while we infect each other with vision and hope. And I began to think about the wisdom that she offers for living in this time. She reminds us of a simple and ancient practice that has something to teach us about unplugging from our tendency to become consumed by news of increasing rates of infection and rising numbers of deaths, news of the trajectory of the stock market and shortages in stores, and how to reconnect with stillness and compassion, how to make this a sacred time when hearts reach out where hands cannot, when words reach out where arms can't embrace. There's a time-tested practice in the Jewish tradition that has much to offer us in this time of unplugging from the current of fear-mongering and reconnecting with the energy of care-mongering. 22 minutes before sundown, on the 6th day of the week, observant Jews will begin to unplug. They will light 2 candles. One, to remember that Sabbath is prescribed in the teachings of their tradition as a pause. And a second, to remember that Sabbath is a practice to honor freedom. Lighting these candles is a way to welcome the Sabbath. And it begins the practice that will not light a fire again for 24 hours, that will unplug from using energy to cook and clean, will unplug from competitive sports and work, and will enjoy a long meal with family and friends. Will sleep long and well to rise and eat a cold breakfast. They will observe a carbon Sabbath and walk to the synagogue to pray and sing. They'll eat leftovers for lunch and spend the afternoon napping, walking, reading, playing non-competitive games. And when the time comes, they will farewell the Sabbath with a song of longing for the next one. It's a practice that still thrives in its many variations in Jewish communities all over the world. I've only truly witnessed that practice a few times in my life. On those occasions when I was in Jerusalem on the Sabbath, and on another occasion when Don and I were in Skokie, a community just north of Chicago. We were staying in a primarily Jewish neighborhood. From sundown on Friday until just after sundown on Saturday, there was a distinct difference in traffic patterns. There were fewer cars on major streets. On residential side streets, hardly a car moved all day long. Late in the afternoon on Saturday, families were slowly walking together to the synagogue. After synagogue, they made their way to homes for dinner. The local shops were closed. The neighborhood was quiet. It was almost eerie to me. This was a day in their week when they unplugged from work, while the essentials were savored slowly, and the unessentials waited for another day. Our return to Edmonton last week was reminiscent of that day in Skokie. With many practicing self-isolation and many of us observing physical distancing, with businesses closed and transit services reduced, with cancellations of classes, concerts, sports events, with libraries and gyms and theaters closed. It felt much like that day in Skokie. Our streets are quiet and our shops are empty. It's a difficult time for those who can't work, and it's a difficult time for those who are utterly overworked. It's a difficult time for those on fixed incomes and for those who can't earn their income just now. It's a difficult time for families at home together, and it's a difficult time for those who live alone. It's a time to sacrifice many things and a time to savor other things. It's a time to practice distance while we increase connection. It's a time to savor solitude without drowning in isolation. It's a time to give our planet a rest from the toll of our living. It's a time to give each other space to stay healthy while we find new ways to care for one another. This could be a time to cultivate Sabbath practices, a time to unplug and an opportunity to reset, not only in personal and communal ways, in social and global and planetary ways. A time to unplug and reset, much like we do to reboot our computers, much like we do when our bodies or our spirits need time and space to recover. It is time again for the deepening and quieting of the spirit, as Mary Oliver's wisdom reminds us. It's a time for us to be informed without being overwhelmed. It's a time for us to be still without becoming paralyzed. It's a time to deepen connection and maintain physical distancing. It's a time to wash our hands often and a time to open our hearts more. It's a time to create our own Sabbath practices, to make phone calls, send cards, clean closets, empty drawers, cook simple, healthy meals using up the food we have in our homes, organize pictures, share online or by phone or letter whatever is inspiring us and giving us a reason to laugh or cry. It's a time to unplug from fear and anxiety and reconnect with all that deepens and quiets the spirit. A time to sing, pray, center down, as Lynn Unger reminds us. Or a time to go down to the sea, in Mary Oliver's metaphor. A time to meditate on a tree or reconnect with the strength and grace and beauty of whatever it is in the natural world that holds us until we grow easy. So as we pause to ponder how we might engage the poet's invitation to make this time sacred, how we might invite one another to make this time sacred. Scared and sacred use the same letters of the alphabet. It just takes a little rearranging to turn the letters scared into the word sacred. To cultivate some Sabbath practices, to unplug in order to reset and reconnect. Oh, I invite you in this week to share with us by email or voicemail what it is that is holding you like the sea, what practices you're cultivating for the deepening and quieting of the spirit.
Hello again. As we heard Nancy's words and as we reflect on the question that she offered to us, we have an opportunity to reflect and state our intentions, to strengthen them as we enter into this day and into this week. So I invite us into these words. Despite our distance, we refuse to be alone. Despite our restrictions, we refuse to be downtrodden. Despite being limited, we refuse to stop living. So in the days ahead, we commit to conversations. We commit to nurturing relationships. We commit to self-care and self-betterment. We commit to community. We commit to Sabbath practices. May we commit to finding goodness and leaning into what we find. May we take the connections we feel in this shared experience and invite others into that hopefulness. May an outbreak of health and encouragement spread all around us. May it be so. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you to our crew here in this room for making this possible. And thank you for your continued support of SSUC. Although we're not meeting in person, our community's commitment to others continues. We're grateful for whatever ways that you're able to contribute during this time. Donate online at our website by check, mailed or dropped at the church, through grocery cards available in our office twice a week, and for those of you who donate regularly and automatically every month, thank you. A special invitation now to join Nancy and I tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon using your computer in a video conference conversation. To be face-to-face for about an hour. You can pop in and pop out, to check in with each other, to share together the question that Nancy offered to us today. Visit the address on your screen now to learn about how to join that Zoom conversation tomorrow. You can do a few things ahead of time and learn how that works by visiting that site, ssucedmonton.com/ZoomConnections. Look forward to seeing your faces, those of you who join us tomorrow. Here are our lights. And until we move to a new place and to a new thing that will occupy our day, we will now let our lights take a new form. We will let the energy and the creativity moving in this candle, moving in us, change its shape and change its form to make our way into the day with us. From all of us here to all of you, stay connected, be well, and happy Sunday.